Hey guys, what's happening? Willie here at the Great Outdoors. I've got a box. When I've got a box, that usually means something cool, off the wall, and just plain irregular has shown up, and I want to tell you about it. Now, before we get to tearing into the box, a little history needs to be presented to you guys. Now, that history has to do with the Johnson Reel Company. Now, I know I talk about them quite frequently, but that's kind of my thing because they are one of my favorite reel companies because of the technology and the design of the time. It was incredible. Now, in 1949, Lloyd Johnson, he pretty much introduced the world to a new form of fishing reel. The very first model Johnson that came out of that company was the Model 10. This was the beginning of the Sidewinder, if you're familiar with the Sidewinder reel. Now, the Sidewinder took on quite a few forms as it went on, all the way up to the Model 80, where the Sidewinder at that point ceased to exist, which was right around 1955-ish. Now, when you got into the Sidewinder, that Model 10 was only made for a short period of time, and there wasn't very many of them made before the Model 10A came into play. Now, you see where Johnson's numbering system came into play as well. You had a number, that was a reel. Then the next model came up with an A or a dash A or a B, like the Johnson 100B, for example. Bringing us around to the Johnson Century, the 100, the very first model of the Century, came out in 1955. That's right. That technology of being able to switch sides for left-handed or right-handed retrieve, having a switch to actually switch from left or right hand, being able to flip the spool over if you still had line on the spool and make it into an underspin simply by dropping it to the bottom, flipping it to left-handed retrieve, and flipping the spool over. I mean, that's incredible. It really is. It's an incredible scenario for the time frame. Now, the Century was actually in production all the way up until 1979. Then, of course, later on in the 1990s, they put out the 40th anniversary. Now, this was an expensive reel to make in that time frame. The 40th anniversary was an incredible reel. I have several, and they're great reels. To be made in the U.S., that was a pretty penny right there. Now, let's drop back 1950s, when you had your Johnson Century come into play and the Citation came in out there. Now let's scamper on through the 1950s and jump into the 60s, where new additions, new reels, new spin cast reels came into play. Reels, for example, like the 130, the Sabre, the Sabra, the Sabra, the SABRA. A couple of other reels that popped in during that time frame in the 60s were reels like the 710 and the Commander 150. Now, the Commander 150 was really just a 710, but with a fancy new feature called the AccuCast, which was really nothing more than kind of hovering your thumb over the button when you cast and being able to kind of slow it down to drop that lure wherever you wanted, if your eyes were that good. Now, if you had eyes like mine, you might have prematurely pressed the button a little early or a little late. Now, unfortunately, in 1969, I was born. No, wait a minute. In 1969, unfortunately, another unfortunately unfortunate thing happened, unfortunately. Lloyd sold the business. Lloyd sold Johnson Reel Company to Johnson Wax Company. That's right, the floor wax people. Now, what are the odds that another company by the name of Johnson would buy that company? That, though, is where we're going to end our little bit of history. Because even though Lloyd sold the business, he stayed with it. He stayed with the business and stayed in control of the business up until the early 70s when he passed away. But where he sold the business is where we're going to stop right now. And we're going to talk about that particular era. And we're going to talk about the two reels that came in just before they sold and just after they sold to the Johnson Wax Company. One of those reels is in this box right here. And I've got another one on the way. Now, let's get down to the table, open up this box, and take a look at one reel that was part of a transition for the old Johnson Reel Company. After I moved the other 75 reels that I've got sitting on this table right here for a video that never happened. Because that's how things work around here sometimes. Sometimes you make a video and sometimes it doesn't go out. Sometimes you end up with a fistful of daggone ultralight reels that you don't know what to do with. Because that video was terrible. And I didn't put it out. If you want to see it, I'll make another one. But it had to do with all of these. Let's dig into this guy here. Now this reel is from Gary. We were talking about this reel. Actually, Andy and I had talked about this reel at one point. I think Andy got one, or maybe even two, if I remember correctly. I talk to so many people. Half the time I don't even know what we've talked about and who I've talked with it to about, or about to. We got some of that, which is always good to have because that lets you know that things might be all right. Now, here's some information that was really, I love it. Gary sends me this stuff, and it's incredible. What's on the top of here? Parts indicated in yellow below were replaced by new old stock parts during reassembly. That's incredible. Hey, here's me some parts for some reels that I have laying over here that I ordered. These growly guys here, these Century 100Bs. Those are going to go with those guys over there, so we'll set them there. That's what we're looking for there. Take that out of there, put that there. That box will get used again at some point. Put this away before I end up leaking all over the table. And let's take a look at this guy here. I might need that. Come back here, old yeller. Wow, this is really nice. Look at that. This thing is gorgeous. There's your AccuCast. I do not know how that works. I've got to figure out the AccuCast. Now, this is, as you can see, or maybe you can't see, I'm not sure if you can see it or not. This is a 150A. This reel has a couple of little subtle differences compared to the 150. I have a 150 on the way, as well as this 150A here that I got. Look at that bullseye on the button there. That's cool. All right, as you can see, a gorgeous reel. This thing is beautiful. This is the 150A. Now, on these particular reels, they only did a 150 and a 150A. There was no 150B or anything like that. Here is the hearsay. After Lloyd sold the business, this was the first reel on the outer edge of selling Johnson Reel Company to Johnson Wax. This reel came out just after the sale. So basically what you're looking at is really like the first reel of a new era, I guess, of a new time frame, when new ownership of the Johnson Reel Company came into play. Now what's kind of funny is Johnson Wax bought the Johnson Reel Company. After Johnson Wax bought the company, they sold the company, and then they sold it to Johnson Outdoors. Two companies named Johnson bought Johnson Reel Company. So this was just a short video to introduce you to part 1 of the Johnson 150 and 150A Commander with AccuCast. We're going to do part 2, and we're going to take the 2 reels, put them together, and take a look at the little subtle differences. We're going to see you on the next one, whatever the next one may be. I like to say whatever the next one may be, but I obviously know that we know what the next one may be. Maybe? Maybe? You know, the word may be is very convenient because you can cut it in half and make it may be, or you can maybe. Just a little bit of English there, a little play on words, a little silliness that teachers never tell you anything about. Man, I like this thing.